Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I am super excited today. I've got another lovely guest on the show. Zoe, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Kate. Lovely to see you. How you doing?
Great, thank you. And being talking to a fellow nutritionist, it's going to be great this morning because we can geek out on all things nutrition.
My favorite topic, of course.
Yeah. But before we dive in, can you share with listeners a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Look, obviously, I am a nutritionist and a chef and have been in the wellness industry for the last 20 years. I'm very much focused on trying to excite people of how to get good food, good nutrition on the plate without it being overwhelming as well. I've obviously been in TV and radio for a long time, and I've just completed my third book, I should say, Eat Your Way to Healthy Hormones. So for me, my passion is really just trying to kind of, excite people just to be that little bit healthier without it seeming too overwhelming.
And I think that's probably a thing nowadays. We kind of get inundated with all these different messages and different diets to try and
Mm.
things we get told we should be doing that sometimes it does just feel like it's just all too much.
Yeah, look, I really feel it's trying to kind of disseminate and go through all the different information that actually is out there and really be your own health advocate. It's very important that you have a good idea of sort of what, good health actually means to you. But it's also trying to look at, well, what is a sustainable lifestyle? I mean, I'm a busy mum of only one child. So I mean, maybe I've got a little bit more time than other parents out there. But even then, I try and sort of find something that's very manageable, easy, that services everybody and services my lifestyle as well.
Mm. And, speaking about kids, most of my listeners
Yes.
will be listening in with kids. And, sometimes it's hard. You think there's things that
Mm.
you know that you will eat, and there's other things that you're sitting at the table and you're trying to get them to eat and they don't like
Yes.
it.
Yes.
And it's
We all know that one.
frustrating. Yep, we've all been there.
Yeah.
So, do you have any sort of tips or tricks when it comes to helping with kids getting, good nutrition in?
Yeah, look, I think it's really important to actually to give a little ownership back to kids as well. Obviously, it's age appropriate. In those younger years, I'm very much an advocate of baby-led weaning. You know, the creative play, the sensual play, and the involvement that we actually have by touching and feeling and having that exciting relationship as well. I think also what we need to kind of take down a little bit is that it's not about having this crazy, huge, diverse diet. If you can't get that into your diet, it's really just making sure you're really looking at those sort of core macros. You know, every meal has a little bit of protein, every meal has a little bit of good fat, every meal has a little complex carbohydrates in it. And whether that may be a little bit of avocado for them to squish in their hands, and they may even get, 1 tablespoon as part of, not the whole quarter avocado, which is what we want. But it's just trying to be as creative and making sure those building blocks are actually in there to get them, what they need from a hormonal balance, from an energy level balance, and, obviously the building blocks of good nutrition.
Mm. Well, I know my girls are a little bit older, so mine are 9 and 11. And I
Yes,
know getting
same
them
as me.
involved, yeah, getting them involved, with, even asking, my 9-year-old to be like, what should we do for dinner tonight? And, if they can help in the process of making,
Yeah,
some snacks for their lunches that, they're actually really proud. They're like, oh, well, I
yeah,
made
yeah.
this.
Yeah, we had an interesting, we had some people over for dinner on Friday night. I said, some people over for dinner. And she always gets a bit upset when they don't have kids. So for me, I get her into the kitchen. I get her trying out. So I said, let's make ice cream. I said, let's find some really interesting berries. So we, went to the market. We picked out some good berries that she thought. We got some coconut milk, and we got some normal full cream milk. And we made 2 different types of ice cream. And we put some nuts in one. We put some cinnamon in another. Look, I think I could see how curious to see what the outcome would actually taste like. So for her, she was much more inclined to sort of eat that food, much more inclined to try the variety and the different textures. We had some blackberries in there, which we don't normally eat. And I think that in itself, like you said, taking that ownership, and just sprinkling in all these other things that they might not necessarily, different herbs, different spices. That's how you can add these textures and flavor profiles, because it is really important with kittens that they try and get them as expansive as they possibly can when it comes to taste and texture, because otherwise what happens is it becomes very normal to have those bland textures, and when they do try different things, it seems quite out of the ordinary.
Mm. And on today's podcast, we're going to be chatting about hormones.
I love
And
hormones.
yeah, and I think sometimes when it comes to food, people don't sort of think a lot about or make the link
Mm,
connection to hormones. You know,
mm.
they know different symptoms they may have if their hormones are out of balance. You know, they get told they need to sleep more or look at their exercise, but not necessarily their food. So, how does food relate to our hormonal balance?
Oh my God. Okay. So if you want to break it down to quite simply, we have three categories of hormones. We have our lipid hormones, our amino acid hormones, and our peptide hormones. So if you actually think about how we create our hormones, our lipid hormones are derived from fat, our amino acids derive from protein, and our peptides are a bit of a combination of all of it as well. So it is absolutely critical that we're eating a really good supply of good fats in our diet. So these are often things like our reproductive hormones, things like estrogen and progesterone, and we need to make sure that they are derived from cholesterol. So we need to constantly get fats in our diet. Then we look at our amino acids. I mean, obviously, that's coming from our protein. We need a beautiful cross section, not just one type of protein. We need lots of variety of protein because we need all those different amino acids to create those different types of hormones. But then we also need to really make sure our gut and our elimination pathways are working effectively as well. So we need to make sure our microbiome's working. We need to make sure that we've got lots of diversity when it comes to fermented foods and different types of foods that all that bacteria actually eats. And then we need to make sure those elimination pathways are also working. So, our bowel, our kidney, our liver, they're all working at their optimal level. So what we then need to make sure is that we need to make sure we've got a lovely cross-section of different fibers coming into our diet. We need to make sure there's different herbs in there to sort of support, kidney health and gallbladder health and liver health, just to make sure when we're eating those foods, we're breaking them down into sort of, those water soluble ability breakdowns, and then we're passing it all out of our diet as well. So the good thing is, it's not quite as complicated as what we actually think it is. It's not like we need to go down one route. It's just that we need to make sure that what we are eating is, the protein, the fats, and the carbohydrates in every meal, and ideally in every snack as well.
Mm. Well, I want to touch on just the two main ones there is that people do get scared of fat and they do get
Ah,
scared of
yes,
carbohydrates. So, can we
yes.
break down for listeners, what
Sure.
fat and what carbs they should be aiming for?
Sure, absolutely. So when we look at fats, mainly obviously what we're trying to avoid is our saturated fats, or we can have some plant-based saturated fats, or we can have animal saturated fats, but just not in high quantities as well. We want to make sure that we're removing those trans fats. And just to kind of give you an example how fats actually work, we've got a lipid layer around every single cell in our body. But what we need is we need a constant supply of these good essential fatty acids, or ideally sort of our omega-3. So these are fish, avocado, extra virgin olive oil, nuts and seeds. And if that integrity of that lipid layer gets compromised, and that will get compromised when we eat things like our trans fats, because those molecules are very unstable. And what it does starts to affect those other, beautiful fat-based molecules. So therefore, we don't absorb our food as effectively. We're more likely to be inflamed from the type of foods that we're eating as well. So I always excite my clients by saying, look, a tablespoon of good fats in your breakfast, lunch, and dinner is pretty much going to give you your recommended daily intake. It doesn't have to be too complicated. Use some beautiful extra virgin olive oil like on your omelette in the morning, have a beautiful salad, put some nuts and seeds, put some avocado in it. And then at night time, mush some avocado in with your sweet potato mash, or, have a little bit of those roasted nuts and throw them into a salad. It doesn't have to be a lot. It just needs to be sort of, peppered over the whole entire day. So fats are good from that perspective. Fats are not just great when it comes to sort of maintaining the integrity of our cells. They're also very good because they're huge anti-inflammatories as well. And for most of us, we've got a very pro-inflamed diet, and that really can actually affect the stress levels our body's under. When we're stressed, that influx, we get an influx to cortisol levels, and that then affects insulin, and it has that sort of feedback, that negative feedback system. Also, what it is, these foods are very filling. You feel nice and full. They can slow the release of other foods. So when you're eating a bit more processed foods in the diet, they can slow the release of those foods. And we get a slightly more sort of lower glycemic intake. Now, when it comes to carbohydrates, again, talking about glycemic intake, what we're really trying to focus on are these lovely complex, unprocessed, low GI types of foods as well. And purely for the fact is when we eat these foods, they're slower to break down. So that means when we are converting those glucose into sort of that usable carbohydrate into glucose, we don't get the spike of blood sugar levels or the spike of insulin. We get a nice sort of slow releasing. So again, we we feel more full. We also find that the impact won't stress the body out, so we don't get that sort of spike in cortisol, which then again, like I said before, raises our insulin levels as well. So we get a bit more even killed. But a lot of the time, these foods are more nutrient dense. They've got a beautiful combination of different B vitamins in the diet as well, so very supportive to build hormones, to build our energy levels as well. But again, we find that we just have a little bit more variety in how we feel over the day. So what that kind of looks like is, obviously we want to make sure that on a plate, about 50% of our diet is coming from those sort of lower starchy kind of carbohydrates. So, it could be your salads, it could be different things like your capsicum, mushrooms, avocado, just sort of not having overly too much of sort of the starchy sort of carbs in the diet. And then we do want to make sure, at least a quarter of our diet is still with those grains in there. I mean, I know some people are very pro grains, some people are very anti grains. I think the better thing to try and choose is the unhybridized version of grains in our diet. So these are ones that haven't had over time, haven't had those molecules change. This is things like quinoa, paprika, amaranth, spelt, kamut, teff. So there's a lot of them, and we don't need to eat a lot of it to actually get. So about a quarter of a cup of those type of grains in your diet, whether it's coming from good quality bread or grains, can really kind of increase those lovely slow releasing carbohydrates, and they're very sort of filling. I also find that people kind of are a bit more, they like foods like that a bit more than they often do on the other kind of carbohydrates. But it is really important that, when we're looking at our plate, 50% of it is coming from those types of foods.
Yeah. And protein, I think, maybe it's fairly recently, but there has been a big sort of push to really up your protein now. And you can get protein bars and protein cookies and protein shakes and everything, they get advertised that they're higher in protein. So what's your take on that as well?
Yeah. Look, I mean, processed protein versus, animal protein or good legumes. Obviously, we want to be going for the least processed we possibly can. So to give you an example, we need about 1 to 1.5 grams per kilogram of protein in our diet. I'm 70 kilos, I need 70 grams of protein. Now, that's not just going and eating a chicken breast of 70 grams. It's understanding that about 100 grams of chicken will probably have about 20 to 30 grams of usable protein. So that's what we're aiming for, the usable protein as well. It is, I think, yes, those things like protein powders and protein bars, they serve a purpose. They're very supportive when we're really running out of time. They can be great to throw one in your handbag. Often I travel a lot, so I've often got either a sachet of protein I can just sort of mix into my water bottle and off I go. This does save time. But again, I do try and focus on my protein and my clients' protein and my family's protein coming from more quality animal sources of protein. Or good things like, beans, legumes, different higher protein grains in the diet, because they are a lot more complex in there. We need those 22 amino acids, but 8 to 9 of those amino acids we can't produce in our body. So we have to be getting from our diet as well.
And as we age, obviously our hormones change. And
sure so,
unfortunately, yes. And we've spoken about on the podcast before quite a bit about perimenopause and then menopause. But what sort of nutritionally are the things that we should be maybe focusing on, or the things that change for women as they start to hit those sort of times of their lives?
Yeah, a lot of different things happen sort of in that kind of, going from that fertile kind of years into our life, into our perimenopause. And mainly is, your listeners are probably getting to understand, is that constant fluctuation. When we're having that fluctuation, we also affect things like our digestive hormones as well. So these are hormones like CCK, GLP-1. And what they do, they are there to actually support things like insulin conversion, fat conversion. But that often means that our gut is not absorbing as effectively as it was before. We also look at estrogen. Estrogen has a huge effect on how we actually build muscle. So often what happens is that when our estrogen levels are falling, our ability to build muscle starts to decrease as well. And that's why we need to be a lot more consistent and reliable when we actually are having protein in our diet, because we need to make sure we've consistently got the building blocks in there to build. It's about 30%, it actually decreases the ability from that point on as well. So when we look at health, it's not just kind of looking at hormones in one snapshot. It's actually looking at it as a whole as well. We also know that when we actually are we're going into perimenopause, because these sex hormones are actually all produced by fat, particularly cholesterol. what I often see in my clients' pathology is that because perimenopause isn't just a straight line, we can't always get one clear snapshot when it comes to their hormones. But what we can look at is other markers like cholesterol, vitamin D, and total protein, and things like even C-reactive protein, which is inflammation. I often will see that cholesterol levels start to increase because that cholesterol is not being used. Okay, it's not being passed either as well. So it's important that we actually do start to modify where we're getting our fats, and we really do start cutting down on more of that saturated fat and leaning a lot more towards those essential fatty acids as well, just simply because we're not using cholesterol in the way that we previously used it when we were in more of our fertile years as well. The other thing to really take into consideration is that microbiome. What's quite interesting is we've got each little cell, we've actually got estrogen receptors on some of those bacteria. So we need to make sure that we're actually feeding those receptors correctly and feeding that bacteria correctly, because the issue that can come from that is that we can have circulating estrogen within our body. And for some people, if we're not eliminating that, that can lead us down to obviously imbalances in our hormones, but it can lead us to maybe some of those potential cancer hormone-related diseases. So it's really, really important that we are actually getting the right balance of good fats coming into our diet, good, high fermented foods coming into our diet, and those fibers, a lot of those prebiotic fibers as well. So that things like cannellini beans, it's actually when we cook and cool foods. So when we cook and cool things like potato, pasta, different beans in our diet, because of that cooking and cooling, we change that molecule structure. We make that fiber a little bit more resistant. So it goes all the way through our gastrointestinal tract to our colon and starts proliferating, feeding the good bacteria within that environment as well. So it's kind of nice to know we can have potatoes more regularly than we thought we could.
Yeah, exactly. Or, sometimes I'll make a rice salad and again, you cook the rice, you
Beautiful.
cool the rice, and it's really great
Perfect.
for that resistant starch. And I think, constipation is a very big issue for a lot
Yes.
of people, and
Yes.
especially as they age. So
Mm,
getting more of that resistant starch in and more of that fiber in is super important. But I know,
yeah.
some of the clients I have are like, oh, I feel like I eat enough and I just don't know how to get more in.
Yeah, I think that. Look, I do hear that as well. Look, it is also important that enzymes, and we've got an enzyme, and we don't want to get overly technical here, but we have an enzyme called aromatase, and aromatase is one of these enzymes that actually, as we put on weight, it will actually convert estrogen, so testosterone, into estrogen. So it's a real problem for men. It also has impacts on us. But we all, across the board, enzymes play such a critical part in actually how we digest and process the foods and digest and process our hormones as well. So I always sort of get my clients to kind of do a bit of a one step or a couple of the steps to kind of make sure their gut is better, making sure that they're having things like apple cider vinegar or lemon for every single meal. Or alternatively, a handful of rocket, getting those lovely bitter cruciferous vegetables into their diet because they're so rich in different enzymes, and particularly things that stimulate like liver and kidney, gallbladder. With a little bit of lemon juice before each meal will actually prep that gut ready to start breaking the food down. Because for a lot of us, we are eating enough food. I hate to say it, most of us are eating more than enough protein. Protein isn't the issue a lot of the time. It's absorption, which is the issue. A lot of the time, we're not absorbing the protein that we're actually consuming. So to make sure that we actually are absorbing effectively, we need to make sure that we're digesting effectively as well. Things like having bromelain from pineapple, one thing is absolutely non-negotiable in my life is I have a cold pressed juice every single day. So my cold pressed juice is beetroot, carrot, grapefruit, bit of ginger, bit of turmeric. What I'm doing there is I'm actually getting a high fiber environment. I'm getting a high hydration environment, and I'm also getting lots of those beautiful sulfurogenic foods that actually support my liver and my gut as my first kind of food in my diet overall. If you're a little bit concerned with the fructose level, it's so minimal versus the benefit that you get. But you could have a handful of macadamias or, walnuts and almonds if you're concerned, a couple of tablespoons of yogurt, because that fat and that protein will slow that down. I don't find that that's a problem because it's got so much fiber in it. The fiber is actually what's slowing that down, because I think we get a bit fearful of juicing, but a lot of the time it's because we're not having the fiber in that food. And that fiber is the thing that will actually fill us up, but also help with that bowel motion as well.
And I think too, it kind of depends what type of juice you have. If you're putting in four fruits and one vegetable, and the ratio is the
Exactly.
reverse, then there's going to
Exactly.
be a lot more sugar in it, than what we
Yeah.
probably need. So,
Yeah.
sticking to those veggies first and then adding in a bit of apple or, as you said, a bit of grapefruit, something for a bit of sweetness is
Mm.
definitely, the ideal way to be juicing too.
Yes. Yeah. And look, I think, with any with any juicing, it's just slowly increasing it to that sort of less sweet profile if you can. So if you're someone who's really been used to only having sweet juices, to get you to go into a beetroot juice every day is not going to be something that you're going to enjoy. But just slowly changing those ratios could be a good idea, or just having small amounts as well. You don't have to be having a litre of juice. That's not necessary. If you're having it every day, just a small amount. The other thing, obviously, is, I mean, I'm as busy as everybody else. In an ideal world, I'd love to be able to be juicing every single day, but it's not possible. So what I do is I juice enough for 3 days. I put it into a glass jar, put it in the back of my fridge as well. So I'm reducing the oxidative stress, maintaining as much of those nutrition, enzymes, vitamins, minerals as I possibly can. I'm still getting something great even 3 days later.
Mm. And before you mentioned GLP-1s, and we have to
Interesting, aren't
talk
they?
about, yeah, we have to talk about, industry, and Ozempic's come on the market and it's become
Mm,
very, very popular, and there's a number of others too.
mm.
So what's your take on how things are changing with the GLP-1s in the nutrition sort of realm?
Look, I'm all for it, to be really honest. I'm here to actually support my clients. And if that means they need to take things like Ozempic or Metformin or whatever these, great. But the issue that we have is we want to make sure that people are actually, when they're taking these drugs, they're not nutritionally inadequate in what they actually should be eating. Because I'm seeing quite a lot of people that are taking it, having great success, stopping it and reverting back to, exactly what. But that's not the bigger and broader issue. It doesn't matter if you're losing weight. If you're still not eating a healthy diet, it will compromise your health in other ways, because diet is not just about weight. Diet is about every part of your body. It's about your brain health. It's about your anti-inflammatory health, your microbiome. So it's really, really important that you are doing this sensibly. Again, obviously, with a lot of these drugs, for people, that makes them feel a bit nauseous. It actually reduces their ability to consume food, because it is, that is how it's working. It's working on those receptors and making sure they're actually, down regulating the ghrelin and, suppressing that sort of hunger hormones. But it's absolutely critical that we are still having good nutrition throughout the day as well. I think also, I think maybe in some cases, I mean, people need to be realistic. It's not the Valhalla. It's not the thing that's going to lose all your weight. So on average, it's about 10% of your weight. So, if it's cycling can sometimes be a good success for sometimes these things. I think, from what I'm seeing with a lot of my clients, they will cycle it, we'll do it, I'll take them off. I don't personally take them off. Obviously, that's not my responsibility. I'm not a GP, but I will work with their GP or endocrinologist or whomever they might be working. We will cycle it, we'll take them off for a bit, we'll do a really clean, healthy diet, we'll do some cleansing in that period of time, nutritionally kind of build them back up, and they might be able to go back on it as well. But this is not the one-stop shop. We have to have nutrition and we have to have good exercise, because that's part of being health, the broader picture of health.
And as you said, I think it's that nutritional and educational piece that's coming in. It's getting that education around, okay, well, this is kind of like a jump start that's going to give you sort of,
Yes.
the help to get it going. And then to keep it going, then we can address the diet and the exercise and that as well.
Yeah, look, what's been quite interesting is some of these studies on inflammation and these particular drugs. And look, they still don't exactly know the line yet of whether it's the drug helping it having an anti-inflammatory response, or it's the change in weight and the change in diet that's having the anti-inflammatory response as well. But I think there is a lot of validity and there's a lot of amazing things and amazing support. But again, exactly like you said, Kate, it's making sure that we still have that foundation there. And we've got to sort of teach people about that foundation still, because it's not like they don't have access to good information. It's making sure that their GPs or whomever they're working with, different clinics, are also reiterating how important good nutrition and good gut health actually is.
And when it comes to your new book, what led you to write your new book on healthy hormones?
Yeah, look, it's quite interesting, because I mean, I've had such a crazy hormonal journey in my own life. I found out at 29 I couldn't have children, so it was 5 years of IVF. And then when I went down the path of trying to have another child, I found out very quickly that I couldn't. I had a very low chance of falling pregnant, around 2%, because I was in that world of perimenopause at an earlier age than what I thought I was going to be. It's quite interesting because I then started to really sort of dig a little deep and find out more about it, because weirdly enough, I didn't understand enough. I very much had worked with people with the hormones more like insulin and cortisol. They were sort of the hormones that I'd been working mainly with clients over the course of their life. I had my own sort of insight when it came to reproductive health, but I didn't understand that perimenopausal kind of what that health world looked like and what that hormonal health looked like. And again, I started to address it very much from an anti-inflammatory perspective, and because that is something that I thought knew exactly how to do. I knew how to put sort of those good nutritions, those adaptogenic herbs into my diet, and making sure to sort of down-regulate and just sort of ease everything off a little bit. And that had great result, for me and for my clients. But I just wanted to kind of give people a bit of a blueprint, because it wasn't just so much my own personal hormonal journey. It was also that I had a 10-year-old who basically is going through this, and it's a bit of a running joke in our house. I'm like, you'll get your period as I'm losing my period. We've got this incredible crossover going on in our life where I need, you're going to go through puberty as I'm going through the new puberty. So I really wanted to actually understand exactly how I could talk to her, the language. I wanted to make it casual. I wanted to include all these good, beautiful foods into her diet and my diet that was supporting us both. That wasn't going to be making 5 different meals, that can actually support us both through these different phases that we were going through.
And I think that's, lovely, because, back when I was growing up, there wasn't really any talk about it. It was just like, oh, here you go, use these. It's going to happen. Yep, it's going to happen every month now. Good luck, kind of thing. And a little bit like you with my daughter, we've had, open conversations, we've talked about how, the hormones change throughout the month, and how you may feel different with your moods, and you may not even realize, and then you'll go, oh yeah, okay, that makes more sense. So I think even just building that awareness is really important.
Yeah, I think what we do understand about this, particularly that cycle, that month, is that there are times when you are feeling on top of the world. Particularly in those follicular phases, you're often feeling a lot more healthier, motivated, and these are the times that you can sort of put in your personal best. You can do those big meetings. On that second 2 weeks, with such a different requirement that's actually happening within our body as well. We have an increased calorific need of 200 calories. So, but people don't really often, I'll get a lot of clients saying, oh, I just need to eat so much more. I'm like, yes, that's good. You're supposed to be. But choose the right types of food. So even just to be able to explain that to Emily was quite nice. I'm like, darling, there's going to be times that you want to eat certain foods, but you just, understand what do those foods look like? What is going to best support you through that process and make you feel energized and healthy, and not take you down that sort of roundabout, up and down sort of cycle. But yeah, I personally get quite excited to be able to have a bit of a blueprint, and give my clients and my daughter as much kind of insight about what is going to happen, and just not demonize this whole world of it being like awful and doom and gloom and it's just a female issue. Because the interesting thing, obviously, when I do seminars and I talk to people, I really try to explain to people men and women have exactly the same hormones, apart from anti-mullerian hormone, which is the hormone that dictates or says how many eggs you've got. We have the same, and these hormones, we need to support these for men and females. So it's not just my daughter I'm trying to talk to. It's very much talking to my husband, who's going through his andropause or his menopause phase himself, and he's very curious as to what he can do with his diet and his exercise, because he wants to age well and he wants to have great longevity and good health span. As we talk, we're talking about that now as well.
Yes, well, I think sort of, as you said, I think a lot of women start to realize that obviously, estrogen and that drops because they start going through menopause. But men don't think about testosterone levels changing because they're not, they'll start to get some symptoms, but it's not something like that they're losing every month.
I mean, you just have this slow decline when it comes to. I've got this great graph, and it literally just it's like a slow change of color in a man. Basically, they don't have those extreme changes. But in saying that, that is irrespective, because it is going to happen to them, these hormonal changes, and it's getting them to have the empowerment and the wisdom to actually understand and how to normalize those conversations, whether it be with their GP, with their friends, their wife, their partner, whatever that might be. because there are things that they can do, and there's huge lifestyle changes they can do to mitigate the impact of those testosterone deficiencies at any time, because we aren't seeing testosterone levels drop faster than ever before. That has an impact, obviously, on sperm health, reproductive health, but also their mental health as well. It has a huge impact. We know that things like weight gain has a critical impact. Like I was talking before, that those aromatase, those enzymes, when men actually increase and get beyond a certain BMI, beyond a certain body fat, their conversion from testosterone goes into estrogen far faster. So they're going to have more of those estrogenic symptoms. They might feel that their libido is dropping. They might feel like their energy, they'll see a change in their body composition as a result of obviously alcohol, drug intake, a lot of these, lifestyle choices that people, high stress environments. These are things that we need to be explaining when they're in teenagers. We need to explain it then, that they have control over these situations and what they can actually do to mitigate. Because although that decline is very gradual, it's going to happen, and we want to make sure that they're at their peak and they're at their health as well.
And as you said, it's starting, there's a lot more sort of stats coming through to show that it's happening a lot earlier than it should be as well.
Yeah, and also, with the impact of things like xenoestrogens and our insight and understanding of those type of pollutants, whether it be a body cream, whether it be something we're consuming, whether it be a surface spray, and obviously external things that, we need to explain to people that, trying to sort of focus on a cleaner living situation is critical when it comes to reducing our exposure to those synthetic estrogens that then can mimic our natural estrogens. And then on the flip side, it's explaining to people, well, let's get phytoestrogens. People get quite confused about phytoestrogens because we think it's a food that we should only have where our estrogen levels are decreasing. And that's not true at all. I mean, if you look at cultures like Japan and a lot of Asian cultures that have a huge influx of good quality soy products, there aren't any major, estrogen-related cancers. Phytoestrogens, we need around 50 milligrams of these types of foods. To give you an example, that's going to be around 200 grams of a good quality, non-genetically modified tofu and organic tofu. It could be things like adding sesame seeds or maybe flax seeds or linseeds. About a quarter of a cup of that. What I actually do is I actually get a little pestle and mortar at home next to my olive oil. So I just throw in whatever nuts and seeds and I crush them up and I'll throw them on a salad. I put them in Emily's Vegemite sandwich when she just wants a basic sandwich, sprinkle them in there. She doesn't know. So again, it's just trying to pepper all these foods consistently in small amounts over the day, over the course of our diet.
Well, I think there's still a little bit of sort of people are scared sometimes around the sort of the phytoestrogens too. And again, that comes back to, HRT and, different studies being done and not being correctly done. And so that information has gotten out there and it's kind of just kept going.
Perpetuated. Yeah. I mean, I was doing a panel talk and with Michelle Bridges, and there was an incredible, my brain slipped perimenopause brain. I can't remember her name right now, the doctor who I was working with. It was quite interesting, some of the stats that she was saying. I think that study was back in 2003 when they looked at HRT, and they basically then, with the improper kind of data that they actually collected, they made the conclusion that they came to was that HRT had an increased risk of cancer, hormone-related cancers. That's what was HRT being consumed by, in England, I think it was around 20 to 30%, took it down to 5%. It radically changed the impact, and that radically changed in the symptomology. I mean, I remember watching my mum go through that. I remember, in the 90s, her, everything was a bit better, and then it just slowly, because the doctor basically said you shouldn't be taking this, she was up and down like a yo-yo, absolute yo-yo. And I really, on reflection, I thought she was going crazy. I think we all think our mums are a little bit crazy, but on reflection, I really felt for what she was actually going through now, because being that age, and just that misinformation that was actually given to women, which is just unfair.
So I think it's still going to just take a little bit of time, and this is where if we can encourage women to have informed conversations with their doctors and their health professionals, then if you're having the conversations and you want to explore it, the options can be there.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to create that baseline from an early period in our life as well. I always say to my clients, it's your right to go and get your bloods taken at least once, if not twice a year. It's your full blood count is for free. Fortunately, we have a Medicare system that covers that. But again, it's understandable if you go and see a doctor and you say, I'd like a blood test, they will push back on you. It's really important that you go to them with symptoms. You say, this is what's changing. This is how I'm feeling, because then they have an ethical responsibility to create a diagnosis. And that comes from blood tests, or one stage of it comes from blood tests. So, it's really important that you are your own health advocate. Do a little research, talk to your friends, find out what they've done previously. Because again, we don't know what those symptoms are. We don't know what they link to. But if we can create that baseline, what we can look at is comparatively all through the course of our health. My daughters have blood tests. We looked at all of it. We did stool tests. We looked at everything, just to make sure that we've got some really good insight, of what her health picture looks like. So then we can always compare it all the way through her life.
And when it comes to sort of hormonal health, maybe someone's listening and thinking, yeah, maybe I'm kind of hitting perimenopause, menopause, and I'm starting to see some changes, but I'm not really sure where my hormones are at. What sort of tests do you recommend that they should go off and chat about with their doctor?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's three types of testing that you can do. Obviously, there's lots of types of testing, but the free test that you can go and do is that you will go to your GP, you will ask to have your hormone profile done, and that will be predominantly it's your reproductive hormones. So they'll look at things like your estradiol, your progesterone, your follicle stimulating hormone, your luteinizing hormone, sometimes testosterone, sometimes not, and progesterone as well. So you really want to kind of create and look at that picture. The other thing I think is really important is look at your cortisol. So you want to look at unfortunately, we'll only give you a snapshot. We'll only look at what's called your AM cortisol, which is when it's at its peak. So if it's higher than that, we want our cortisol to be up. We don't want it to be low. We want it to be up. It's very important in the morning. Obviously, we want to stimulate the body to get moving and start foraging and finding food. But it's really important that we do have that snapshot. If you think there's more to it, you're going to have to pay for these other tests as well. So you can do what's called a Dutch test, which is a urine test that will actually give you 4 timelines over the day. And what it will do is that we'll have a really good look at not just those reproductive hormones, but it will look at all the other hormones. It will look at things like your DHEA, which obviously is still part of that reproductive world. It will look at basically all your adrenal hormones as well. What we want to see is melatonin. We want to see what is actually impacting what. A lot of the times I will find, because hormones have feedback systems, positive and negative, mainly negative feedback systems. But what I will often find is sometimes if I can actually support, say, adrenal glands, how adrenal glands work, or how we actually, so when we are becoming a little bit ovulatory compromised, when our ovaries are starting to not be as working as effectively, we really start recruiting our adrenals to actually produce that little bit of estrogen and testosterone, because they also produce it. But if you think about what's happening in our lifestyle, we're also then hammering our adrenals, because our lifestyle often is a lot more stressful as well. I find if I can just address their adrenal glands, adrenal cortex, often what that will happen, that will actually help and have that positive feedback system on those other reproductive hormones as well as obviously it then can affect sleep. It can then affect mood in a positive way. The other thing, when we actually are getting our blood tests, look at everything as comprehensively as you can. So look at your zinc, look at your look at your inflammatory markers, like I said, like your cytokines and your C-reactive protein. Total protein will not only look at whether you're absorbing your protein, it will look at if there's inflammation markers happening in your gut as well. So are you not absorbing your food? Now, if you want to go down the path of sort of looking a little bit deeper at your microbiome, you're going to have to do a stool test. And like I said, unfortunately, all of these are still, you have to pay for them. You can go to your GP though and actually say you think that there might be some parasites, or there might be something else. You need to, again, talk about symptoms if you can, because at least that will give you one window, but it won't look at all the bacteria in your gut. That's something that you've actually got to pay for yourself. But, investing sometimes once in a while in something like that actually really does have a lot of, it gives you a lot of confidence in a lot of ways, but also it means that you've got that information that then you can go to your GP and say, look, this is happening to me, and they have to investigate.
And, when it comes to anything, preventative is always going to be easier than treating. So if you can catch anything earlier, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the best way you can say it. I mean, I'm in the industry of preventative health. It's incredible. Unfortunately, sometimes it's a little harder to justify the cost. because people don't know what's going to happen. Because when you're preventing, you don't know that that sickness is around the corner. And that's why we do need to look at things like pathology, because it does give us a little bit of a warning sign. I mean, one thing I really always make sure that every man and woman is doing is having their thyroid tested correctly. So often when you go to your GP, they just test your what's called your thyroid stimulating hormone, your TSH. And your TSH is a combination of T3, T4, and reverse T3. So you really need to look at all of those things. T4 and T3, they're like a little balancing act. The more stress we get, the more our T3 levels go up. What happens is another hormone then comes in called reverse T3. If your RTV is elevated, it's a pretty strong indicator that your body's under a big state of stress. So what will happen is that that can also be a little bit of a warning sign for things like hypothyroidism, so an underactive thyroid. The other thing you want to test is the antibodies. You know, you can test these two different antibodies that will give you an indicator of what's going on. If they're elevated or out of whack, it's an indication of things like Hashimoto's. We are seeing record numbers of Hashimoto's. It's crazy how much we're seeing, and that is often because the two minerals that we need a lot of is things like iodine and selenium. They used to be heavily in our soils, and they're not anymore over agriculture. You know, things like iodine, you can do iodine salts. I'm not as a big fan of that. I'm more a fan of things like, you know, eating different seafood and seaweed and things and foods like that, or supplementing with it. It's eating more foods with like selenium in there, like Brazil nuts in your diet as well. But the other thing we also want to make sure is, again, it comes down to those xenoestrogens, or those you know, making sure that we've got those kind of clear, healthy lifestyle, because they are hormone disruptors and they can actually be mimicking the wrong types of hormones in our lifestyle, as well as we need to manage our stress, which is a big reason why that's happening in the first place.
You know, and as we were sort of saying before, a good place to start is probably having the conversation with your doctor, starting with those free tests first.
Yeah.
And then once you've gotten those results, then you can work out whether or not you want to invest further. Absolutely. Or, you know, you can make some changes from those first tests and maybe some of your symptoms already disappear.
Yeah, look, I mean, if the thing is also is that, you know, when we are doing this testing, we have to kind of be aware that this model is for sick people. So even when we are looking at sort of what those reference ranges are, often sometimes they should be much broader or much smaller. So that's why it's a good idea. Just if you've got those consistencies in your test, even though some things might not be coming up as deficient, if they're radically changing, then something's going on, you know, and we need to kind of be comparing apples to apples to make sure that we actually are getting a clearer picture as to potentially what is actually happening with those blood results.
And I know you have a few retreats coming up at
yes.
Gwingana. So can you share a little bit more about those?
Yes, I'm very excited. So this is my first retreat with Gwingana, which is in the beautiful Tullabudgera Valley, just outside of the Gold Coast. So I'm holding a Live Life Well seminar with a big focus on hormonal health and sort of what you can do. And just kind of, a lot of the time, what I'm trying to do is just kind of give a blueprint, just explain to people what are hormones, where is the link between our diet and hormones, and at any phase, at any stage, what can you do, you know, by getting a good amount of good food in your diet. So I'm going to do a great seminar on explaining a lot of that. I'm going to do some beautiful cooking classes as well, just to, you know, whet everyone's appetite about how delicious it can be to eat for well-balanced hormones. Plus, obviously, you've got access to all the incredible sports. So you can, the good thing at Gwingana, you actually get to sort of tailor it to where you are at. So if you're someone who maybe wants a little bit more of that nourishing, relaxing environment, the exercise you can do will support that. If you're someone who wants to kind of really kind of rev everything up and maybe support a bit of weight loss, you can do it that way as well. So you've got exercise there, there's sleep seminars there as well. And obviously you've got the incredible spa, so you can have, I think, some of the most world-class treatments I've ever tried. And so that's going to be from December 1st to December 5th.
Oh, that sounds amazing. And I think, you know, including those cooking classes is great, because sometimes, you know, people get the info, but they might not have like the confidence in the kitchen. So if you can give it a go and then, you know, sort of learn and go, oh, it's actually not that hard, it makes those changes a little bit easier.
Yeah. Well, what I've done is I've done sort of a breakfast, lunch, dinner. I've tried to kind of implement, you know, just a little bit of a hack every way through the day. And you might just say, I'm just going to apply that breakfast and just do that. And that's great. Obviously, I'm including my cookbook there, and I'm staying for the whole 5 days because I really love to get to know the people who are at these retreats. And, you know, there's opportunity then for them to kind of take a little bit of a private chat with me. And then, you know, a lot of people don't always want to put their hand up in that seminar and reveal something about what's going on in their life. So it's great that I'm going to have the opportunity to sort of chat to people as well.
And if there's listeners that are listening in and you haven't been on a retreat before, retreats are amazing because they are sort of so immersive and
Mm,
you're away from everyday life. You have time to sort of think about things and to, feel
mm,
things in your body that you might not have even sort of
yeah,
realized were happening. So they can really be sort of transformative
yeah.
experiences.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, obviously, I'm in the health industry, but I had some remarkable things happening to me on retreats. I mean, I going through all that IVF, I actually went to a retreat for, I've had many, many miscarriages, unfortunately, even through the IVF process. And I went on a retreat for a week and I just cried and submitted and just, went deep, deep into myself. And I definitely then next time I did IVF, I fell pregnant with my beautiful daughter Emily, and I do think it had a huge impact as to why I really nourished my adrenals, and it just kind of got to kind of switch things on and switch things off that needed to kind of have that time. So I'm a big believer, but also you're in a very safe environment and you're with like-minded people, so no one's there to expose you, no one's there to take advantage of those vulnerable moments. You don't have to go there if you don't want to. You can just enjoy being pampered. It doesn't mean you have to go down that path either. But I think it's really important, one time in your life you do experience something like this, because the idea is that you take some of those tools and you put them into your everyday life. It's not just about the week that you're there or the 3 days or the 1 day or the 10 days. It's about trying to learn those tools to then implement into your everyday lifestyle.
I totally agree. And I think sometimes too, even the people you meet, chatting to other people that have been going through similar things as well, it can be very helpful too.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've met some pretty amazing people at those retreats. In fact, one of them I'm incredibly good friends with, and love Baha Etmahan. I love working with her. I think she's one of the most inspiring women, but I met her at Gwinganna 15 years ago.
Amazing. Now, before we
Yeah.
wrap up, I always love to ask my guests that if there's one piece of health advice that you could give
Mm,
our listeners that after listening to this podcast today, they could go off and instigate straight away, what would it
yeah.
be?
Look, I think be your own health advocate. It is just so important that you trust yourself. No one knows your body better than you. And so when you're seeing a GP or you're trying something new or you're trying a new food, really kind of be that person and celebrate the fact that you're actually trying to be healthier as well. It's not easy to sometimes make radical changes in your life. Gradual changes, it takes time. So give yourself that time to do it and be that advocate for yourself.
I think that's fantastic advice and definitely something that we can all think about. Now, before we wrap up, where can our listeners reach out and connect with you?
Right, so you can either reach out on me on Instagram, which is obviously Zoe Bingley-Pullin. You can go old school. You can email me if you want to, which is zoe@nutritionaledge.com.au. But obviously, all the information about Gwinganna and the retreat is in my link tree in my bio. Obviously, and you obviously can go to gwinganna.com.au to find out more information about it.
Amazing. Well, I'll link up all your details in the show notes and
Thank
I'll
you.
link up the retreat details for Gwinganna too in the show notes. So listeners definitely head across there and check those out. But thank you so much for coming on the
Yeah.
podcast today, Zoe. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. And a big thank you to you, Kate. We need more people like you just singing the song of health. We're all trying to work it out. So I think we all appreciate what you're doing as well.
Oh, thanks so much.